I remember the moment she texted me. A simple, casual line that carried more poison than she could have imagined. "Don't worry, I'm at a friend's." My thumb hovered over my phone for a fraction of a second before I typed back. "I'm at my lawyer's, don't come back." I didn't even pause to think. It was the kind of response that required no deliberation, only the cold, undeniable clarity that comes when trust is broken beyond repair. Her name is Emily, and we'd been together for 4 years. We built a life that, on the surface, seemed perfect. A cozy apartment in the city, shared routines, inside jokes that made strangers smile when they overheard. But appearances, I learned, are always deceiving. Behind Emily's laughter was a growing distance, a wall I couldn't reach. And I, stubbornly blind, mistook her compliance for love, her silence for comfort. I'd been at work that morning when I noticed the subtle change. The way her phone buzzed, her quick glances, the slight hesitation before she answered my questions about her plans. I didn't want to suspect her, not yet. But the gut, trained over years of observing human behavior, doesn't lie. Something was off. I spent the next few hours going through the motions. Meetings, calls, emails, all under the weight of that nagging feeling in my chest. By the time I got home, Emily had already left. The apartment felt colder, quieter, as though the walls themselves had grown aware of her absence. And then the text arrived. I didn't respond immediately. I let the words sit, heavy and sharp, slicing through the illusions I'd been clinging to. The calm, calculated voice in my head, part shock, part professional instinct, told me what I already knew. This wasn't just a casual night out with friends. This was a declaration, a small act of defiance that said more than any argument ever could. So I sent the reply. Short, unambiguous, final. "I'm at my lawyer's, don't come back." No explanation, no pleading, no emotional manipulation. Just truth. And as soon as I hit send, a strange sense of liberation washed over me. The tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. Every second of suspicion, every sleepless night, every quiet frustration began to loosen. Because sometimes the first step toward freedom is not a confrontation or a compromise. It's simply acknowledging that the line has been crossed, that the bridge is gone, and that no matter how much you once loved someone, some doors once shut should never be opened again. The hours that followed were surreal. Emily expected me to panic, to call, to beg, or at least to send a flurry of texts demanding answers. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence do its work. I went to my lawyer's office, signed a few papers that felt more symbolic than legal, and sat back, letting the reality sink in. Every detail of our relationship that I had once cherished suddenly seemed like a carefully constructed illusion. I thought about the subtle signs I had ignored over the past year. The way she laughed a little too loudly at some meaningless comment, the way she avoided my touch during quiet nights, the way she would glance at her phone with a secretive gleam in her eyes. I told myself it was stress, work, fatigue. But deep down I knew. I had just refused to admit it. Until that text. Until that one simple act of defiance that cut through years of delusion. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt strangely empowered. It was not joy, not relief, it was clarity. A clarity that demanded action, that refused compromise. Emily had chosen her path. I had chosen mine. And the two paths were now irreversibly divergent. Back at our apartment, I walked through the rooms as if seeing them for the first time. The living room, once a place of shared laughter, felt alien. The kitchen, where we had cooked countless meals together, was just a space now. Even the bedroom, the most intimate of places, seemed to echo with emptiness. I picked up her favorite mug, turned it over in my hands and set it down carefully. Nothing sentimental, nothing bitter. Just observation. That night I didn't wait for her call. I didn't scroll through my phone for messages. Instead, I sat on the balcony, the city lights spreading out before me, and let the wind clear my thoughts. I remembered every moment that had brought us here, the good and the bad, and realized that in all of it, I had given my trust freely, foolishly perhaps, but sincerely. And for the first time in years, I understood that some forms of betrayal are not about the act itself, but the audacity to cross boundaries that were never meant to be challenged. When Emily finally returned, the apartment was quiet. She expected confrontation, tears, maybe even a plea for reconciliation. What she found instead was calm, methodical. I had already packed a few essentials into a bag, things I would need for the days ahead. She looked at me, confusion and guilt flickering across her face. And in that moment I knew. Everything had changed. The woman who thought she could bend me to her whims now faced a truth she hadn't anticipated. I had already decided, long before she walked through that door, that our story had ended. Emily froze in the doorway, her eyes wide, searching mine for a reaction that wasn't coming. There was no anger, no pleading, no explanation that could undo the weight of her actions. She had assumed that our bond was unbreakable, that my loyalty would withstand any deception. But loyalty, I realized, is not blind. It is measured, tested, and once shattered, it cannot be reassembled from fragments. I watched her take a tentative step forward, then another, as if crossing some invisible boundary. But I did not move. I didn't need to. The apartment, once shared and familiar, had become a silent witness to the shift. Every object, every corner, every light and shadow reinforced the truth she had ignored for too long. I had made a choice, and she had left me no choice of her own. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mark, we can talk." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to say, Emily." The words landed like a hammer, final and indisputable. She looked around as if the apartment itself was betraying her, echoing the absence of the warmth and connection she had once taken for granted. And then she did something I didn't expect. She tried one last attempt at control. "Please don't do this. I can explain." I let her speak, even though I knew there was nothing to explain. Every excuse, every justification, every plea was just noise against the clarity I had finally found. I thought about the years of compromise, of silences swallowed, of small betrayals overlooked because I loved her, because I had hoped she could love me back with the same honesty I gave her. But hope, no matter how fierce, cannot rebuild trust once it has been deliberately broken. I picked up my bag, slung it over my shoulder and paused at the door. I looked back one last time, not with regret, not with sorrow, but with understanding. Emily was still there, caught between guilt and disbelief, realizing too late that the world does not wait for those who betray without consequence. As I stepped out into the night, the city lights stretched endlessly, a reminder that life continues, indifferent to the endings of any single story. And yet, in that indifference there is freedom. Freedom to move forward without the weight of betrayal. Freedom to reclaim a life built on truth rather than illusion. Sometimes the hardest truths are also the most liberating. The love I had for Emily had not vanished. It had simply transformed into clarity, into understanding that some chapters are meant to close, and that the only way to honor the self is to walk away when the betrayal is absolute. That night, I walked out not as a man defeated, but as a man finally free.